They are losing the Heisman Trophy winner, the Blintnikoff winner, or the guy that should have won the Blintnikoff in Malik Neighbors.
Another first-round receiver.
Two first-round receivers, a first-round quarterback. I think Garrett Nussmeier is going to be a great quarterback. I think he'll do great this year. I think that he's had the perfect amount of time to develop. He comes from an NFL background. His dad's coached in the league, so obviously he's been developed properly for a very long time. I think he's smart. I think they're going to have weapons, but I think they're going to have a lot of other problems. And where are you going to replace the 1,000 yards rushing that you got from the quarterback last year? You know, it's one thing to talk about the freaky passing numbers he put up and the receivers and what they did. But I don't know how you necessarily replace immediately what he added from the running element, especially if your offensive line isn't that great.
Yeah.
I was talking to my dad today about Jaden Daniels and what he'll provide for Washington. Even though their line isn't that great there, he'll overcome that because of his skill set. Nussmeier doesn't have that skill set.
Yeah.
And you lose a guy like DeCorian, who I think he would have lost all along. There's just way too many ties to Texas. And with us humming, and you see the spring game and the quarterback room and all the hype, and we can really sit on that for a year and keep Arch under wraps and be like, look, he's Superman. You saw what he did? You can really take that approach. It was going to be hard to overcome that. Should be concern for the Bayou Bengals right now, though, because their standard is to win championships.
Yeah.
And although I think that their floor is still around 9 wins, always, if you get below that, that's a travesty. I'm concerned that they're not really flirting with that standard of winning championships that your Georgias, your Texases, even your Bama still, your Ole Miss, even with how active they are in the transfer market. LSU, I got my eye on LSU and the Brian Kelly program of what exactly that ceiling can be.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, too, with Brian Kelly and LSU is the fact that he takes the job. He's always been a great coach, you know, being at a school like Notre Dame. Very hard to recruit there, especially with the academics, and then kind of some of like the old school traditions that Notre Dame has, if you will, that's separate from some of the other elite programs in college football. And there's a reason why Notre Dame hasn't won a national championship in almost 40 years, 50 years, right? Yeah. It's been a long time. So, you know, him going to LSU and, you know, going to the SEC championship the first year, beating Bama the first year, the expectations are already kind of set, right? Then you have a game-changing electric offense. You put in 3 first-round offensive players. One wins the Heisman Trophy the following year. Now, it's like you're kind of regressing. You go from, you have this ceiling, getting to the SEC championship in Atlanta.
You lose.
Year one. You win the Heisman. You have, you know, 3 first-round NFL offensive players. The second year, or the third year, yes, you have, you know, a great quarterback playing and coming in. But you also have the defense is still an issue. They're probably like a year or two away. And now you're bringing in Oklahoma, Texas, and then you still have the Bamas with DeBoer. You still have Georgia, all the schools you'd mentioned. And for LSU, I do think they're always the state is so rich in talent. If you're able to, you know, recruit and retain, you know, 50%, 70% of those guys every year, you're going to accumulate enough talent to be able to compete at the highest level. Yeah. Especially with Texas nearby and things like that. But however, now it's just more so. Like, because I looked at the class before DeCorian Moore committed, they had the number 1 receiver, I think the number 1 or 2 running back, and then they had DeCorian Moore. So I was like, okay, they're already off to a hot start. Now, to mention something you had talked about, because, you know, currently Oklahoma is, you know, recruiting Jonah Williams. We've been the favorite. We kind of slipped out of it a little bit recently.
Been at the top of his recruitment the whole way.
Like the top 1, 2 the whole way. But like, as you had mentioned, David Stone last year, I mean, it went down to the wire with us in Miami for him, with Peyton Bowen. Literally, if he didn't turn his paper in right, he'd been at Oregon. Right. You know, and Wesco, like all these Wesco, right?
Yeah.
No, not Wesco.
So who are you talking about?
Who's the dude at Texas? Wingo.
Oh yeah, Ryan Wingo.
Yeah. So like, you have people like that are, you know, when you're that level of recruit, you take your visits, you take your time. Jeremiah Smith was committed to Ohio State for a whole year, and I know they were clinging for dear life because that kid was visiting every school in America, right? But it's like, you have to be able to win these battles.
The level of these, like the challenge of these recruitments is at a higher level than it has ever been before, because they're all nationwide.
They're all nationwide. Anybody could be a player. There could be, I mean, I sent you a graphic the other day of Julian Lewis, highly touted quarterback that's committed to USC right
Juju.
now. Yeah, like he's going to visit Indiana? What is that about?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, maybe
Exactly.
they have a ton of money. I don't know. Maybe they're
when
throwing
you
him
get
$10
these
million.
national offers early, he committed basically like as a sophomore, basically to USC. That's another thing. Like that recruitment doesn't end for 2-3 years. And LSU, what you're saying, I think, is they're oftentimes maybe in the mix for these elite recruits right now. Some of my best friends in the world are huge LSU fans. I know that their standard is not to consistently lose guys to Oklahomas or even Missouris of the world. I know that there was a huge focus on getting more depth and talent on the interior defensive line, and they swung and missed. And, he could have said everything that he said and been correct in what he's saying and have dozens and dozens of people like myself agreeing with the basis of, don't overpay just to overpay and get a guy, or don't, go over a guy's value consistently. And yet I could also read between the lines and say, you're saying that because you swung and missed on a player that you needed to get. And as I say all the things about DeCorian Moore, you're bringing up all these national recruitments. I say all these things of like, you're fighting against it. He's from right up the street from Austin, Texas. He's here like every other weekend, it seems like. He's got all these former teammates and players that he grew up with that are currently on the team and love it here. And, the quarterback room is what it is. Sure. But at the end of the day, you got to overcome that. We went and got Ryan Wingo, and Missouri had the best season that they've had in a decade.
You got to go take.
And he's there. He had family ties to Missouri. I'm sure there was a huge push in the area that he grew up with to stay and go to Missouri. Texas goes in and gets him and takes him. And he's in Austin showing out in our spring game when he should be at his prom. We're going out of state. We're going to Louisiana and getting guys. We got a Derek Williams. That was absolutely a recruit that Brian Kelly wanted to get. He didn't get him. He's in Austin. He's going to start. I think he'll be one of the best safeties in the SEC this year. You know what I mean? And if you're not doing that, your Brian Kellys, your Billy Napiers of the world you got other schools. Obviously there's not other schools in state of Louisiana that you really got to worry about. But there's other schools that recruit the state of Louisiana in your region that you got to worry about that look like they're thriving and on an upward trajectory. And I'm not saying that LSU's on a downward trajectory, but I don't know what the ceiling is for Brian Kelly anymore, because this year is year 3. And if he doesn't compete for the SEC championship, I personally think if I was a fan, that crutch of what he had and what he's been using at Notre Dame that you brought up, they didn't have the resources over there. And before that, he was at Cincinnati and smaller schools, I think maybe Central Michigan or something like that. And he won everywhere he was at. But the crutch of you didn't ever have the resources of LSU, that's gone. You got all the resources you need at LSU. There are a lot of coaches, Dan Lanning would go win a national championship at LSU. I think Sark would go win a national championship at LSU. There's a dozen guys, and Lane Kiffin, I think, could thrive at LSU. You know what I mean? So you can't have other coaches in the conference. I'm talking 3, 4, 5. At the end of this year, ask yourself, is Brian Kelly, and I know that y'all love to defend him in Baton Rouge, and you got him sitting on this throne and this pedestal, and he deserves more credit than Sark and all these other guys because his resume, blah, 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 blah. If he doesn't make it to the playoffs, the 12 team this year, that's got to go out the fucking door, because you're going to have, he's not even going to be a top 5 coach in the SEC if that's the case.
And there's teams snipping at his heels too. Like, you got a lot of teams, like going back to the Dominic Williams recruit too. You got teams like Oklahoma who are like, hey, we're a player here. We're gonna go get, like, when you got to make your mark in these conferences and do that type of stuff and retain people. But you also, like you're saying, go get people from around the country. Go get players here and there. Right now we're favorites to land Quincy Porter, who's a receiver out of New Jersey, like top 5, top 4 wide receiver in the country, in the nation. And it's like, he's in New Jersey. Like, you got to go.
Y'all can't rely on Dallas anymore. We can't rely just on Texas anymore. Nobody in the country. We're fighting off in-state. We're fighting off Ohio State for in-state talent, Georgia for in-state talent,
Bama.
Everybody in the country, and that was always that way in Texas. But that's going that, like, if you don't think every coach is nipping at the butt to fucking go to Louisiana and start taking talent, I'm not even just talking about the top players in the state. I'm talking about the 3 stars that go to the NFL out of the state of Louisiana at a higher clip than anybody in the country. I mean, every school in America is going to be hungry to go. If LSU has another humiliating season on defense, that's all that state produces is dogs on the defensive side of the football. Some of the best defensive backs in the world come out of the state of Louisiana within the borders of New Orleans and Baton Rouge. You know what I mean? So if you have another down year defensively, and there's not really a surefire answer right away.
Yep.
And you're sitting here talking about what you got coming in from the high school ranks and say Ole Miss goes to the SEC championship or Ole Miss goes to the playoffs. And Lane Kiffin's like, I don't give a fuck about the high school ranks. I got another superstar that just transferred in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, your little quote that you're proud of about not overpaying for the value of a player, that's cool. I'm just competing for championships.
Yeah.
So you got to be on that level, and that is the standard for LSU. And if Brian Kelly doesn't do it, I absolutely believe that they'll find somebody that does. I'm just ready to see when that fan base starts to chirp a little more about that situation. Obviously, you wait and see a little bit, but I think we're going to find out very quickly this season what LSU's about and what Brian Kelly's about moving forward.